Hey there, friends. Looks like we're actually up and running. That's exciting. So I'm going to be making goofy faces at you here for hopefully just another second while I look to make sure everything's seemingly going. Hello, Zach. Hello, Stephanie. Good to have you guys here. Well, from my point of view, it looks like technology is up and running well enough to satisfy me. So thank you guys for being here. The purpose of today, well, I'll be a little bit selfish here, is I want to connect with you. I also want to open up myself, share anything about me you want to know, share my reflections with you about things you'd like my reflections on. Personally, I'm just going to spend the next 3 hours talking about myself. That's okay. Personally, I've been incredibly humbled the past few months, having a lot of you guys start viewing my videos and giving a darn about what I have to say. So I want to connect with you guys here. So that's my selfish agenda. And when you have questions, feel free to comment them in. My purpose today, as I open my eyes, because apparently I'm excited about what I'm about to say. One of my purposes today is I'd like to get to as many questions as I can, whether they're lighthearted questions, heavy-hearted questions. I'm totally cool with any of that. And given I want to get to as many as possible, I'm going to be doing my best to, and I've got like a cattle prod under my desk here. I'm going to be shocking myself to do my best to give rather brief answers in other unlike my other videos where sometimes I'll just be as elaborate as I want to be in the moment. So that's what we're going to be doing today. And I just want to take a look at some of the questions coming in. Well, Denise, thank you. I'm happy to hear my videos have brought a smile to your face. Yes, I do live in Charleston, South Carolina. And thank you for the hellos coming in. I'm going to slide over to a question, actually maybe a few questions that have come in via Facebook. So Stephanie Powers asks, do you think it's possible to work through all the layers and truly find self-love in one lifetime, even when there's been severe abuse? And I must say your videos are awesome. Yeah, you got the codependent chord in my heart there, Stephanie. Thank you for that. And I love the question, Stephanie. Here's a JP opinion for you. And needless to say, I just interrupt my thought there. Anything I have to say here or in any other video, my request of you is to not take what I have to say as truth. Please take it as my opinion. It's my relative truth. So with that said, I don't want to disempower you by asking you to disconnect from what feels true to you. So back to your important question, Stephanie. Well, that's a good question. My personal take on that, if I were to act like I have an answer, is no. I'll quote the old saying, life is a journey, not a destination. The destination of complete self-love, complete self-acceptance. So it's a wonderful destination to have on our map. Yet, do we ever get to that destination in one lifetime? I don't know. What if we don't even get to that destination in 1,000 lifetimes? But if I could also actually spin your question slightly differently, if we've been through severe abuse in this life, can we get to a place where we're accepting of ourselves enough to tolerate our own company? My experience is, heck yeah. That doesn't mean it's easy, and I know working with people who have been through severe abuse, sometimes it is a long journey before a person can get to a place where they say, you know what, this weirdo who lives inside of me called me, I can stand their company enough. In fact, I kind of like them. And I also don't like other things about them, but I can stand their company enough, I can accept them enough that I don't have to be self-medicating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, through disconnecting from myself, through dissociation, or self-medicating through substances, self-medicating through intellectual stimulation, self-medicating through intellectual sedation. So I love the question, Stephanie, and to me, absolutely, there is hope and good cause for the hope. And I will also, I love this question, I will add the deal where if I'm getting artsy-fartsy, I do have the opinion that we pull our baggage in from past lifetimes too. If we're sliding down the illusion of time, we might call them past lives. If we're not so much sliding down the illusion of time, we might call them simultaneous lives that are happening. I think everything is symbolically played out in this lifetime, and it may not have its root cause in this lifetime. Let me just have another sip of ayahuasca so I can keep talking more about other lifetimes. That might be yerba mate, I'm not sure. It all comes from the Amazon. Thank you, Stephanie. I'm just gonna, another question jumps in front of me. So, what kind of diet do you follow? With that kind of smiley face ghost after that question. Happy to share my diet. I don't follow actually any specific diet philosophy. What's important to me about diet is basically eating as clean as I can, preferably organic. I personally don't care if it's certified organic. I think there's a lot of very watered down standards when it comes to what is actually organic. So with that said, eating clean is what's most important to me. Sort of the paleo mentality of if it would grow in nature, then I'll put that on my radar. I do, part of your intended question might be, do I eat meat? Do I eat vegetables? I do eat both. Sometimes my mind goes more towards vegetables and fruit. Other times I legitimately, in my physiology, feel the need for more meat. So I personally believe there's a wisdom inside all of our bodies that is the most pure source of information when it comes to how we should be eating. I believe sometimes our brains, our heads latch onto concepts, ideas, and rationalizations that justify why we should be eating a certain way. And I think that's a better way to do it rather than being completely thoughtless about it. Yet there's the wisdom of the body. And I'll also add on to this. I like to be fun with what I eat too. I used to be very obsessive compulsive about what I ate. I would never touch junk food, and if I did, boy, I would be swimming in guilt and probably shaming myself about it too. And I realized I was being obsessive compulsive with health food eating, and it was hurting my health. You know, it was kind of like helping me preserve, say, 5 units of nutritional vitality, but it was costing me 10 units of mental and emotional vitality because of my obsessiveness, compulsiveness about it. So That's my rationalization for why I eat ice cream sometimes. Sometimes it's more than sometimes. And let's see what else we want to look at. Susie mentions, I want to tell you how insightful you are. I thank Dan McDonald for turning a lot of us onto you. Hope to be able to check in later. Amen. Thank you for that comment, Susie. Dan McDonald, just a quick note about him. His YouTube channel is The Life Regenerator, and his videos are all about raw vegan food. In fact, I think he more profoundly than his passion behind that nutrition philosophy is his passion for life and his sort of spiritual attitude behind how he approaches food. And I love this shout out to Dan McDonald. That brings up, I have a lot of gratitude for Dan McDonald. Last year, he had me on his YouTube channel, and that is where I got introduced to a good handful of folks who are watching my videos today. So thank you, Dan McDonald. He's a very passionate human being. Forgive me, I probably am not pronouncing this name correctly, but Bay asks, do I use crystals? No, I don't. I'm not at all against crystals, but I don't use them. Let's see. Timmy Sweets, that's a sweet name. Asks, could you talk a little bit about the dark night of the soul? What was the period like for you, man? It feels really confusing at this point. I love that question. Boy, I'm going to have to get my cattle prod out to stay relatively concise on this. Another term I would also add on to the dark night of the soul is hitting rock bottom. I believe we all do need to hit a rock bottom in our life. We all do need to hit a dark night of the soul. And that, you know, a lot of times we think about like rock bottom. Does that mean I'm addicted to drugs and laying in a gutter in a pool of my own urine? Well, maybe, but hopefully it doesn't take that for you to hit your rock bottom. A lot of us can hit our rock bottom just within our own self, where we become dissatisfied with presenting who we've conditioned ourselves to be to the world. A lot of times, by a lot of times, I mean from my perspective, all times, we condition ourselves. I don't think it's society conditioning us or our family conditioning us. Let's own our own power. We condition ourselves, says my opinion, to present to the world what's going to get us the approval that as a child we need in order to feel acknowledged. And we need to feel acknowledged so we can feel like we matter. And we need to feel like we matter so we have a place in this world. And we need to feel like we have a place in this world in order for our heart to continue to beat. And sometimes the way we get that sense of acknowledgement is through approval. Sometimes it's through disapproval, just which polarity is the path of least resistance to us. So with that said, could you imagine we spend the proverbial first half of our life living as someone who we're not? Who we've become is now our chief obstacle. Who we've become has been completely sculpted around, I'll be who I need to be in order to get people's acknowledgement. Whether that's active, open acknowledgement, like, yeah, everybody's noticing me. Everybody thinks I'm a good guy, or everybody thinks I'm a bad guy, but everybody's noticing me. Or maybe on the passive side, where I get everybody's acknowledgement through martyrism, where, yeah, boy, I've lived isolated, no one notices me. So we actually notice how no one's noticing us, and that feels like we're being noticed enough. So with that said, we have to lose ourselves in order to find ourselves. And I believe the dark night of the soul, or our proverbial rock bottom, is when we have suffered enough by losing ourselves that now that is serving as motivation for us to wake up to who we actually are. And some people's dark night of the soul will be mild depression. Some people's will be fear depression. Did I say severe depression or fear depression? Probably either way, actually. Some people's will be going through a divorce, my world's falling apart, I'm losing my job, I'm going bankrupt, I'm losing everything. And for me, metaphorically, what it really means is I feel like I'm dying. And actually I am, not literally, yet metaphorically, emotionally, and mentally, who I've become, the construct of me that I've built up over the first half of my life, that person's dying. I have to burn away who I'm not so the miracle of who I actually am can arise. And like anything, being born into a bigger, more authentic, free life, it paradoxically believes it's dying and will react that way emotionally and mentally. It's much like it talked to a fetus going down a birth canal. We know it's going towards a beautiful life. It's life. But if you got inside the fetus and registered its feelings, the fetus would probably have feelings and reactions as though it's dying. We have to be willing to scare ourselves to death in order to live our true life. And I mention this in the sense of the first half of our life. It's not necessarily, in my opinion, tied in chronologically, like, okay, if my lifespan is going to be 90, then at 45 years old, I will start to have this dark night of the soul. Actually, I see a lot of folks, this is happening early and earlier, where they're graduating from the first phase of their life, who they're not, into the wake up of being who they are, which for me can only be discovered on a moment-to-moment basis. It's not okay, I've went through the dark night of my soul, which lasted 5 minutes or 5 years, just however long. So now that I went through that, I know who I am. I believe it's a matter of being present with ourselves in this moment, so we are in a process of knowing who I am in any given moment. Sure as heck hope that who I allow myself to be now is something different, more authentic than who I allowed myself to be last week. Timmy, you got me excited with this question, and I'd love to keep talking more, but I'm going to make sure to acknowledge some of these other people so that we don't trigger their abandonment issues. But here's a heavy question, and it comes up, so let's dance with it. Paul mentions, what happens after you die? If someone truly hates their life, is suicide a good option for them? And naturally, I would say absolutely not. And if this happens to be a question directly from you or about you, and if you are having suicidal thoughts or tendencies, I would actually jump off this live chat right now and call a hotline. Talk to someone who can meet you exactly where you are at right now. So that's my sincerest recommendation. And actually, I don't think this question has a whole lot to do with a curiosity of the afterlife. I think it's more to say, boy, I'm suffering right now, so much right now, that, and I feel so out of control about my life right now, that thinking about taking ultimate control through the expression of suicide, that seems appealing. And I would dare say that control through suicide is an illusion. And I would dare say that inflicting more suffering on ourselves in the name of ending our suffering is also an illusion. And I don't know why, but I will also say this, much like a relationship, I've spent fair share of my time leaving relationships because I don't like what the heck's happening in them. There's pain, there's suffering, I feel out of control, and I lose hope. So I leave the relationship only to find in my next relationship before too long the exact same stuff is coming up. So I would dare say our relationship to life and death, which are two polarities of the same phenomenon, works very much the same way. But again, I just want to stress, if this question is related directly to your heart about suicide, jump off right now, call a suicide hotline. They will meet you where you're at. That's very important. With that said, Denise mentions, you are very entertaining, should take it on the road. Your ultra spiritual video hit home with so many of us. Well, thank you very much. Hit home with me. That's very much where that video came from. Just me being playful with my own dogma that I carry. And actually, just a note on the ultra spiritual videos, one, I get a kick out of those videos too, or else I wouldn't be doing them. And actually, the first ultra spiritual video, while we were filming it, my girlfriend's filming it, and I remember saying to her, I don't care if anybody watches this, I am amusing the heck out of myself right now, because I was revealing myself to myself. I was getting outside of my dogmas and looking at them, not shaming them, not taking them seriously, but being playful with them. So I personally believe that being able to be playful with our own dogmas, our own beliefs that we take seriously, if we can also have another part of us take our beliefs playfully, have beliefs, but not necessarily believe in our beliefs. Let another part of us believe our beliefs. And I also think dogma is such a slippery slope that a lot of the spiritual community, the ultra spiritual videos kind of shine some light on, me being part of that community. We become very dogmatic about being free from dogma, only to realize that our dogma about being free from all dogma, that's what entraps us. That is dogma in and of itself. Yet we don't see it because all we see is our rationalizations about how we're free from dogma. So yeah, I appreciate your reflections on the ultra spiritual videos. I'm going to keep having fun with those. Absolutely. Let's see. Karen asks, when working with clients suffering with depression and eating disorders, what do I need to clear inside of me to best help them? I love that. So I assume, Karen, that you're some kind of coach, counselor, someone. You're probably a human being. Well, just a little bit of food for thought is a lot of coaches or whatever helping profession title we might look at that and say, well, I've never had an eating disorder. So how do I relate to this client? How do I help them? Well, I would say you may not have had a literal eating disorder. And if you had, you would probably know, well, I need to work on that issue of mine before I'm actually more of a empty, helpful vessel to someone else. So we say, well, how do I do that if I've never had an eating disorder? I would dare say if we look at the eating disorder in this example that the client has, if we look at that symbolically and ask, well, what's an eating disorder mean to me? And how I'd answer that in this moment is, it means martyrism. It means victimizing myself. It means trying to control the family by inflicting pain on myself and expressing something that I make sure no one else can control. So with that said, I want to look at it symbolically, see what comes up to me. What's that eating disorder mean to me? And then realize I have my version of it. So I mentioned it means to me a control drama in generic terms. So I know I need to be working on my control drama issues inside of me. My wounds from my past about control, how I've been overwhelmed or disconnected, lost control, as well as what's happening in my life now, so that I can be less blind to myself projected onto the client that I'm working with. With that said, I appreciate you asking for my opinion, Karen. Let's see if I can keep reading English here. And Malika, that's a lovely name. First time I ever saw you was in Judy and Benji's vlog, but I had totally forgotten about that. It was so awesome when you went to Hawaii, what a dream. I appreciate you mentioning that, Malika. Judy and Benji specifically, if you guys don't know Benji Travis, Benji Man TV, he's got a very popular YouTube channel. His is mostly about food, and his wife Judy has Judy Time, a ultra popular YouTube channel. Benji's giving me a lot of advice on YouTube, so I'm happy you've brought that up, because I owe Benji a big thank you. And speaking of big thank yous, I'm going to be very selfish, because I am so selfish that I want to give gratitude to other people. I see a couple of, or a few other weirdos called the Raw Bras commented in. They are some folks that I also owe a huge thank you to for kind of, well, a lot of YouTube mentoring. A lot of the success I have, I would directly attribute to what I've learned from them. So big thank you there. Realize it's not Thanksgiving. If it's not Thanksgiving, are you still allowed to be thankful? That's a good question. Which brings me to another point. There will be an ultra spiritual video about Thanksgiving posted to my channel probably tomorrow. You can look at it and say, well, JP, that's a month late. Or you could look at it and say it's like 11 months early for next Thanksgiving. But in my defense, it was filmed on Thanksgiving of this year. It's just been aging like good wine. It's a vintage video, aged appropriately. And actually, on the serendipitous note, Danimal Rabra is in that video. So you stay tuned to check that out. That should be up on my channel tomorrow. Let's just see. I think I'm about to have a seizure because I'm trying to look at comments, but it keeps moving when other people comment in. So if I have a seizure, call for help. Is that what you do with seizures? Allie mentions, I shocked my chakras last night. How do I get them unshocked, grounded? That's a good question. I'm not totally what you know. I don't totally know what you mean by shocked your chakras, but it sounds really cool, and I'll wish you the best of luck. Maybe unshocking them isn't what you want to do. Tube your face. So our ego is the only thing that separates us from beast. I don't know what beast is. Yeah, just a quick thought on ego. I would dare say from a spiritual perspective, our ego is what creates our sense of separation. Perhaps it's the only thing that creates our sense of separation between us and other people, anything other than what we perceive to be ourselves. So maybe in other words, it gives us a sense of self and other, it gives us a sense of self outside of our creator, whoever, whatever you think that is. Kind of like how a leaf perhaps has a sense of self that says, whoa, I'm separate from this tree. It's perhaps the ego that gives the leaf its leafy identity. But if we actually get out of the first person perspective of being the leaf, we realize, well, this leaf is one and of the same. It is not separate from the tree. With that said, I'm going to take a look at some of these other comments on my JP Sears Facebook page, which if you haven't liked my JP Sears Facebook page, that's a relatively new creation. It's been alive for about a month, so you're welcome to go to Facebook/AwakenWithJP, which is the JP Sears Facebook page. And I should probably give you like some fear-based motivation to like that page, like your life will be nothing. If you don't like that page, your spouse will leave you. You'll leave your spouse. You'll get eaten by a pterodactyl. So go like Awaken with JP on Facebook. We all need a little bit more fear-based motivation in our lives. That ayahuasca is really good. There is a very good-looking redhead in my screen staring at me. Here's a very timely question. Esther, 90% sure I didn't say that right. She says, anyway, hey JP, I live in Sydney where there's been a terrible siege situation here this week. So that's the gunman in the cafe. Man, someone texted me, dare they? So that's the gunman in the cafe. I believe a couple of people got killed. So she mentions that, and then mentions, then 100 children were killed in Pakistan the next day, then 8 children stabbed in cairns. I don't feel safe in this world. I have a 4-year-old child, and I'm terrified for his safety as he grows up. How can I feel safe? It's a great question. I certainly won't pretend like I have a quick flip the switch antidote answer. I would like to say a couple things, though. One, it's probably a very safe experience to feel unsafe. There's a time and place where our fear response, where we feel unsafe, that's incredibly appropriate. It can actually be incredibly unhealthy if you don't feel afraid when you're actually afraid. And if you're living in Sydney and there's been obviously a really heinous act of violence, I would guess your root chakra needs to flare up. It needs to feel unstable because part of your tribe has just been harmed. And your sense of community, communion with your tribe, you're part of that tribe. So of course it hits close to home because it is in your home. So I would ask you to maybe allow yourself to feel unsafe. You also mentioned your 4-year-old child. I wouldn't be surprised if the moment, these violent atrocities happen, if your mind catastrophizes. You're watching the news and you're seeing what happened, but emotionally, yes, you'd be reacting to your experience of that. And I wouldn't be surprised if emotionally you're also reacting to your mind imagining that's happened to your 4-year-old child. So we don't just get afraid of what's happening, we also get afraid of what we're afraid will happen, so we can have our emotional reaction, not to what happened, but what we're afraid to happen to our own child. And if we don't connect with that's actually, I've already gone there in my mind, and my 4-year-old has been killed. If we don't connect with that's actually what I'm reacting to, then we can't really process that grief. So a lot of times you ask yourself, well, what's the most frightening thing that I could imagine could happen? And my child dying, that's probably what the fear's about. It's probably not entirely about what's actually happened with your local and global events. So in other words, part of you actually may be grieving the death of your child, even though they haven't died. So I'd ask you to just connect with that, see if that's true for you. And also, if I could give one opinion, like one single opinion on the best thing a person can do for mental clarity and emotional well-being, it would be don't watch the news. If I could say don't watch TV, period, I'd go with that. But if I have to be more specific, don't watch the news. Because when things happen on the other side of the globe, even though it's not in your immediate tribe, you're going to be reacting to that. And our mind will tell us, well, I need to know everything that's happening around the world to stay informed. Well, there's a place of balance where we cross a line where I'm actually so over-informed that it's sensory overload relative to what my emotional, mental, physiological machinery are designed to handle. In any given moment, there is ugly stuff happening around the world. And my opinion is the news gets a lot more attention sharing with you, and particularly mining the ugliest of the ugly. They get a hell of a lot more attention from that relative to if they broadcast a news story. Hey, there was a grandmother who took her children to the park today. They fed pigeons, they played soccer, and they had a lovely time. That story is happening too, but it's not going to grab our attention, because what grabs our attention is when we have our fear evoked. Even though what's happening has nothing to do with us, even though it is logically not putting us in imminent danger, we get swallowed up into it. We will emotionally respond as though I am in the classroom in Pakistan. I am here in all these 50 different places. The news just told me there's horrible stuff going on. And then, of course, my defended ego says, well, you just want to stick your head in the sand, JP, and have no idea what's going on in the world, and then you can't make a difference. Well, no, I want to be somewhat informed of what's going on in the world. And I also want to be aware of that defense rationalization that just wants me to stay invested in being overly informed to the point where my quality of life is going down. So thank you for this very timely question that I'm sure it's really close to home. Esther, thank you. Let's see, Malika, I never watched the news. Yeah, amen to that. Movadabayand mentions, I heard a guru speaking about girlfriends and how they didn't usually have them, but you do. Why do you have a girlfriend? Well, I'm actually the guru to the gurus. So the gurus you're talking about have probably not advanced up to my level to where they can have a girlfriend. They might still be at the level where they need to suppress their human emotions and desires and pretend they're not there. Does that feel a little bit judgmental? Maybe. So with that said, that's my way of saying when I'm honest with myself, which I try to be at least 1% of the day, and authentic with myself, I absolutely have a desire for a girlfriend. She's a lovely part of my life. Does that make me codependent? Yep. Is that going away in this lifetime? I'd predict absolutely not. So in order to have that guru status of no girlfriends, it would be me being very disconnected from myself. Zach mentions, JP, do you get overwhelmed by the duality of things and believe that being conscious in your actual death, you could or want to merge with oneness and escape a possible reincarnation? It's a good question. So in other words, what I'm hearing Zach ask is, do I want to be reincarnated again or not? And I would say, heck yeah, if I could, if my ego in this moment could choose, sign me up. I love life. I even love how I dislike parts of life, to be honest with you. I hate doing my taxes. I don't like feeling overwhelmed. I don't like feeling all the pressure I put on myself sometimes. So yeah, life isn't all roses to me through my delusional blue eyes. But sign me up again. And there's actually, I made a little, I alluded to part of this point, Zach, in my ultra spiritual video called How to Choose a Guru, where I believe some of us in the spiritual community say, you know, I don't want to be reincarnated. I want to advance to the next level or just merge into the oneness. And I think that sounds incredibly spiritually sophisticated, very poetic. It makes logical sense. Boy, I'm moving forward in my spiritual progression or whatever. And I also notice that anytime I've heard that, it comes from a human being with a human ego who is uttering those words. So I just wonder, what's the story under that story that says, I just want to merge into oneness and be done with this dualistic life. I hope I don't have to come back. Is that just an expression of someone saying, I want to deny my pain and suffering. I'm overwhelmed in this life. So I would guess a desire to not be reincarnated again because we're sick of duality would probably mean we need to get reincarnated again. And I would dare say, when we are excited to be reincarnated again, as we kind of march along that path, when we are very happy about being in this dualistic world, that might mean our sponge is getting close to full. We have an appreciation for this life rather than a desire to escape this life. Desire to escape this life probably means we need to be in this life more. That's probably a biased spin. If you listen to all those messages and subliminal messages, I think that's me delusionally positioning me as like, well, I'm more evolved than the people that don't want to be reincarnated. Yeah, I took my arrogant pills this morning and my prescription refilled. But anyway, I love the question, Zach, and I appreciate you being curious about my opinion on it. Let's just spice things up and go back to some of what's happening on Facebook. I'm not just checking my news feed, I'm actually looking at the questions that were on Facebook. Wouldn't that be interesting if during this video, yeah, I just need to check Facebook. I'm scared what might be happening that I don't know about if I don't check Facebook right now. Pretty interesting. I love this question. William mentions, I'm a non-believer who is interested in spirituality, not based on deities. Meditation and mindfulness seem to be the best techniques. Any suggestions or comments? I think the Dalai Lama said it well. He mentions the only religion I need is kindness. The only church or temple I need is my body. So I would guess, William, it's possible you're a quote-unquote non-believer because you are too damn intelligent to believe things that don't make sense to you. I wouldn't be surprised if you're the kind of guy who says, I am not willing to believe something just because other people believe it. I'm not willing to believe something just because other people tell me scary things or put pressure on me to try and motivate me to believe something. So in other words, I would dare say being a non-believer in this case might be an important route to help you find your true beliefs. So with that said, in my opinion, kind of be embracing what some would call the spiritual world. To me, really, the spiritual world is just the mystery. It's outside of our human mind. Anything our human mind doesn't know, doesn't comprehend, can't comprehend, to me is a mystery. And that's what I would call the spiritual world. I would dare say meditating, mindfulness, doing your best to be present in this moment wherever you go, and being connected to your feelings is perhaps the most functional spiritual thing you can do. I don't care if you had an encyclopedia full of really cool spiritual language and here's what happens in the spiritual world. That is not necessarily grounded inside of you. You're not necessarily connected to your connection to the spiritual world with a head full of sophisticated beliefs and cool sounding lotus flower mantras. So connecting to yourself, your feelings, your body sensations, your curiosities, to me, that is the gateway into true spirituality. Sometimes people will create deities or myths around deities or symbolic representations of deities to help them understand themselves better. And if they don't help you understand yourself better, then I would dare say, take a different path, for sure. I believe that another definition of functional spirituality rather than abstract spirituality is having a sense of wholeness. And I think our sense of wholeness can only be found by embracing our humanness. When you take a look at, well, what makes us feel less than whole? In my opinion, it's when we're, well, one angle of it is when we're emotionally wounded. We feel disconnected inside. We feel separate. To the degree we carry the emotion of shame, shame is an emotion of separation. So we feel fractured inside, separate, maybe even separate from all of life. So the more we can actually heal what I believe we all carry inside, the more whole we actually feel. Therefore, I believe the more spiritual we are allowing ourselves to be, whether or not we call it spiritual. So these mundane, dirty human emotions, I think, are a very golden gateway into our true spirituality that's found where Dalai Lama would say is the only church you need. You, inside of you. P.S. Don't worship the church. Worship what's inside the church. Let's see what else we want to take a look at here. Why isn't it? Okay, that's better. Let's see. Well, here's an interesting question. Beryl asks, what am I supposed to do when I feel like I can't love a person as much again, but the relationship is, okay, so let me translate that into my words. What am I supposed to do when I feel like I can't love another person as much as I love a person in a relationship where it's full of poison, hurtful, full of lies? Well, that's a good question. One that sounds like a challenging place to be. And I would guess there might be a part of it where there's a part of you very much addicted to the familiarity of the suffering, the poison, the hurt in that relationship. So part of you creates a story, part of you writes a story, then reads the story, then believes the story that says, I can never love another person again this much. Maybe no one else can love me again this much. So this abusive, poisonous relationship and this person in it, they're the love of my life. Maybe says this story that part of our ego creates in order to keep us addicted to our very comfortable, painful, familiar experience. So what I would actually ask you to consider doing is curiously consider how part of you benefits from the hurt and the poison. And a second bullet point to consider is from your childhood, what was the version of hurt and poison involved in your childhood? If I were a betting man, I would bet that there is an inner child of yours still stuck in the hurt and poison, saying, this is familiar, it's all I've ever known, therefore it's what I'm addicted to. Might be incredibly uncomfortable, might be incredibly painful, yet I'm comfortable with the discomfort because it's really familiar to me. Children will crave, inner children will crave huge amounts of hurt if they're still attached to hurt being the primary way that they got paid attention to, that they got acknowledged. So a little something to sit with. I appreciate that question. Tracy E asks, what inspired you to start a YouTube video presence? I really enjoy the content, but also that you always present your opinion from your experience and also encourage us to question ourselves. It was a good question, Tracy E. I would say there's two things that I'm aware of that inspired it, probably three. One is it was necessary to happen. Second would be I was teaching holistic lifestyle courses for the Czech Institute for, I believe, about 7 years. And when the time came where I just knew, like, okay, I need to resign from being a part of their movement just because I need to become more a part of the movement of my voice and the movements of my passions and my ambitions and my curiosities. So in other words, I had to leave home to find more of myself and to let myself be more myself. Long story to say, when I was teaching for the Czech Institute, I would go around the world and I would be exposed to a decent level of audience just through those in-person workshops I was teaching. So when I realized I need to resign from doing that, logically I said, well, I need to find a way to get myself exposure to new audiences, to feed my business of how I've made most of my living, which is, well, actually all of my living is comprised of one-on-one sessions with clients and leading retreats and workshops around the world. So YouTube has absolutely become every bit of that, and actually more of that than I could have imagined. And I'm also humbled to say it looks like it's continuing to expand even beyond what I could imagining. And then a third part of that, Tracy, is Danimal Rabra. In February of 2013, Danimal, again, of the Raw Bras, you can check them out on YouTube, and they have a recent interview with me on their channel. Feel free to check them out, subscribe. And so anyway, I was on the cliffs in Encinitas, California with Danimal and his wife, and that was the first interview I did with them for their channel. And I was just sitting there thinking, I'm just really inspired by what he and his brothers are doing on their channel and how they video themselves being themselves, and it's working well for them. So I just became very motivated by that and them to do my version of it. So thank you for that question. Part of me wants to keep talking about that all day long. There's more I could add, but let me leave that question there. Brian, I love this question. What's the difference between a guru and you? It's a good question. Who's defining what a guru is? I mean, which person's definition are we working with would be a first part of it. My definition of a guru is, well, of course, it comes from the Greek word kangaroo, which means he who has strong legs to stand on and a big pouch to put all his little followers in. Other people have a different definition. So with that said, I'll tell you my version of myself, and I think I'm dramatically different than how people would and how I define a guru. It's very important for me to not give anybody their answers. It's most important for me to not believe that I have other people's answers. So when I'm working with clients, doing retreats, and putting videos out, it is never my intention to tell people what their answers are, what they need to do to heal, grow, live their lives better. It is always my intention to be, as best I can, basically an empty vessel that helps this person to help themselves. I personally believe that each and every one of us have a geyser of inner wisdom inside of us that is carrying the answers we need. And I don't think we can find the answers from our inner wisdom until we have the questions laid out to help magnetize our connection with our own wise answers. The wisdom that we keep buried away that we don't know is there. I believe we need the sort of the south pole of a question in order to magnetize the north pole of our answers, our wisdom. So my job is to not give people answers. My job is to give people questions, considerations, to help them help themselves by connecting to their own wisdom. To me, that is very important. I'm also emotionally attached, for whatever reason, to people not becoming dependent and addicted to me. I think that actually would disempower people. It would cause them to discount themselves in favor of honoring what I say and what I tell them. And actually, to me, it would feel like I'm violating them. So for me, very important to keep myself humble in that regard. I will also say that part of what I do is I'll allow myself to use my intuition with a client. And that's basically a way of helping to drum up the right questions to ask a person so that, again, they can find the aspects of themselves that carry their wisdom that they don't necessarily know exists. So with that said, that's a question. Let me tackle a couple more questions here before we sign off for today. Soaring, that sounds a little bit like a Scandinavian type name. Do you know Daniel Mackler, and what do you think about his work? I don't know him. Thank you for the question, though. Dun, 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 dun. Isn't this exciting, watching you scroll? Marjorie, do you do you ever venture to Canada? Yes, I do. I've done workshops in Montreal, Toronto, a few times Waterloo, which is kind of a suburb-ish of Toronto. I've been to Calgary as well. It's been, I believe, 2 years since I've been to Canada, possibly on the map for 2015. So stay tuned on that. Rob Ross asks, oh, here's a, put your seatbelts on for this question. Rob Ross asks, how can you lose yourself on the same path you find yourself on? It was a good question. In my opinion, the way we lose ourselves on the path that we're taking to find ourselves is we stay blind to the possibility that we can lose ourselves on that path. So for instance, meditation. Meditation is, a long story short, something a lot of us do to find ourselves. But when we put our blinders on and dogmatically believe meditating, that will help me find me. If I'm not aware of the shadow side of meditation, that it can be used as a way to escape myself, then there's a good chance that when my unconscious seductive ego is using meditation to basically zone out from myself rather than deeply connect to myself, there's a good chance I won't see that happening, and I won't know it's happening because I don't know it's possible. I haven't been willing to acknowledge how it's possible for me to actually disconnect from myself through meditation. But if I'm aware, okay, here's this practice I can use to find myself, connect to myself. I can also use it to disconnect from myself. That likely means I'll be a lot more aware of when I am disconnecting, using it. Which probably means I'll still disconnect from myself some of the time, but how long I stay disconnected from myself through a practice, meditation in this case, would likely be not as long as otherwise if I'm blind to it. What if you found out you've been meditating for 30 years? Let's amp that up. What if you're a monk in a monastery? You arrived at the monastery when you were 18. You said, hey, world, you chaotic place, adios. I'm going to this monastery. It's on a hillside. That's cool. It's got people with shaved heads. That's cool. This is obviously a very profound place for me to find myself. So you wake up one day, you're 58 years old, and you say, wow, what if I have been living at this monastery, meditating 10 hours a day, walking softly, because I was too scared to face myself in the outer world. But if that 18-year-old monk knew, hey, I'm going to this monastery and it's possible, I'm using that as an escape route from myself, my discomforts, my fears of the future, my fears of what's going on, my whatever it is. That's pretty interesting. And on that note, I'm sure some of you guys have seen my recent ultra spiritual video called Using Ayahuasca. In that video, the kind of the artistic merit intended message of it, it had zero to do with ayahuasca. There's some people really offended saying, how can you say that about ayahuasca, JP? That's horrible. Well, I would say it's actually possible you had an insecurity triggered inside of you about how you're using it. If you were 100% secure about how you're using it, then there's a decent chance you wouldn't have the insecurity triggered and expressed through anger and defensiveness. But back to my point here, that video, zero to do with ayahuasca and 100% to do with how some people in the kind of trendy new age circles use ayahuasca. Ayahuasca being a powerful tool that has the potential for a person to find themselves. Wonderful. The reason why I chose to do that video is I see a lot of people not seeing how they're losing themselves using ayahuasca, how they're using it to belong to these circles who use it at frequencies, times of the day, and in ways that are 100% out of phase with how the native shaman in South America would be using it. So with that said, that video is intended, whether it's ayahuasca or any other practice, it's intended to shine a light to ask us all, how am I losing myself on the paths that I'm taking, believing I'm finding myself? So I wouldn't at all want to paralyze anyone and say, well, stop on your path. Don't go down your path. Stop meditating. Stop reading the Bible. Stop walking barefoot in nature. Stop going to yoga. No, I don't want to say that to anybody out of the fear of I might be losing myself. But what I'm ambitious about is inviting people to expand their, their awareness enough to see how I can be losing myself here. Got me a little excited about that question. And if you haven't seen the Using Ayahuasca video, please feel free to check that out to help further illustrate my answer to that question. Thank you, Rob Rouse, for that invigorating question. You got me excited there. And let's, one more question before we sign off here. I love it. This is a perfect question to sort of ground ourselves and end with. David Shepard asks, do you have any advice for feeling fear without getting frozen in fear? Yes. With that, we could probably say it's incredibly important to learn how to feel fear rather than being so fearful of our fear that we just stay frozen to it. Therefore, the fear is essentially cryogenically frozen inside of us, doesn't go anywhere, and we don't feel it because it's frozen. Of course, things that are frozen numb you out, yet it's there. So we carry it around and we forget about it pretty quick because we don't feel it. And then what we don't feel starts really controlling our life. So how can we feel the fear without getting frozen in the fear? One simple strategy that I think is too important not to mention is keep breathing. when you're connected to fear, whether it feels frozen in the moment or it might freeze, if you can intentionally keep your breath moving, one of the ways we'll freeze our fear is we'll use our breath to do it. We'll hold our breath. So it's kind of like someone jumps out. I did this to my girlfriend the other day. She was coming out of our bathroom. It was dark out, and I just hid behind the door to scare her. It's a little immature of me to do. But when I scared her, that's what we do when we're afraid. It's just when you scare someone acutely, you get to see the breath. They take in the breath and they hold the breath. So we hold that breath in is a way of constricting our fear, not letting it out. Therefore, the more constricted it is, the more metaphorically it's frozen. So if we intentionally will move our breath, we're no longer using our powerful muscle of our diaphragm to lock down, constrict our fear. And then to me, it's also very powerful to notice physically what are the body sensations on how my fear registers. We say, well, when I'm afraid, I feel afraid. Well, how does feeling fear register in this God-given wonderful feedback loop called your physiology? What are the body sensations? You're really connecting to what I mentioned earlier about one of the golden gateways of our spiritual connection, our humanness. Is the fear registering as tingling, tightness, butterflies in my stomach? Is it a heavy sensation? However it registers for you, it's, for me, very powerful when you can notice how it registers and then be with that body sensation while you continue to breathe and allow that body sensation to be there. Allow it to get bigger if it wants to. If it needs to get smaller, allow it. But you being there, very conscious of the body sensation and doing your best to not control the body sensation, that actually helps put us in a very intimate connection with our fear. We kind of become less intimate and less connected with our fear when we're looking at it abstractly. When we say, I feel afraid. Well, let's hit the zoom in button on that. How does feeling the afraidness, how does that actually register for you? And it helps get us more intimate and connected with it. What will keep it frozen is when we're disconnected from it. So, David, thank you very much for that wonderful question. And for all of you there who's taken time out of your day to join me for this chat, where to me the questions are just an excuse for us to have a time and space to connect with each other. Also, some of these questions I realize I haven't had a chance to get through. I haven't even been able to look at them all. So I really appreciate your questions and you taking the time to write them. And even if I regrettably haven't been able to get to them, and for those of you whose questions I have gotten to, thank you for writing those in. And with that said, we'll do this again. So if we didn't get to your question, please preserve it and let me know next time. And if you guys haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please feel free to hit the subscribe button. I'm doing new videos every week, sometimes twice a week. And I'm having fun with that. I absolutely am. So feel free to keep joining in on the fun, consideration, and the curiosities with me through the videos put out here. I wish you all a wonderful weekend, and if you're into the holiday kind of thing, I hope you have a wonderful holiday, and if you're not, then I hope you have some wonderful holidays anyway. Thank you, guys. Talk to you soon.